Welcome back, everyone, to the Ankylosing Spondylitis Reduce Your Pain podcast. This place is fun, it is empowering, it is optimistic, and I am here to tell you that it is possible to feel good again. You do not have to simply live with chronic pain or cope with chronic pain. You can heal from it. Today's episode, we have Peter on. A couple topics that we discuss. We introduce one of Peter's habits that heal. This is lesson number 12. We really dive into shifting our focus. I talk about something called target fixation. Target fixation is where your mind is focused on a specific target. Say it is someone really wants to become a professional player of some sport. That is their focus, and so they live their life according to that focus. Their brain is constantly striving and doing its best to propel them in that direction. In the case of someone becoming a professional athlete, that's typically positive. So what they're going to do, they're going to eat well, they're going to exercise, they're going to work out, they're going to focus on their health and focus on their strengths, and certainly look at the areas of weakness in order to improve those too. And all of that leads to moving in the direction that they're wanting to go. Now, one thing that happens with people in chronic pain and with a diagnosis of chronic illness like ankylosing spondylitis is target fixation takes over the brain in a very, very negative way. And it starts to propel us quickly into illness. You may have recognized this in yourself. This is something that I see frequently. Someone's situation often gets worse after they've been diagnosed. There tends to be an initial relief period when someone is diagnosed with AS because they're like, oh man, at least I know what's going on. I don't like what they told me. It's scary, but at least I know that I'm not crazy, that this has happened to other people, and at least I know what is going on. I went through that. I know a lot of other people that have too. And then their brain starts to focus on the scary stuff. They get online and they look at all the scary stories of people with AS, and that becomes where their brain is targeting its focus. So target fixation, when the brain is focused there, the body and the brain function moving in the direction of that target. So they become even more scared, even more anxious because they see all the other stories of other people that are suffering with AS on the planet. And they don't often find positivity. And so sadness and depression and fear set in. And all of that pulls us out of what health we have into more and more stress and anxiety and disease. So what we do, what Peter did for me, what I've done for others, is we learn to shift the focus. And there are very specific tools and ways of doing that. And once we change the target of the brain, we change the outcome that the body can have. So that is what we talk about in this podcast. I'm really happy everyone's here. We talk about a friend of mine. His name is Patty, and he was a client. He has a great testimonial, and I will encourage you to go see it. Go to skydenton.com, and it's under the testimonials page, and listen to Patty talk about the diet, because he was involved in the low starch, no starch diet because of the theory that Klebsiella was causing his pain. He was in that world for 4 years, and now he's eating more or less whatever he wants. He eats well, he eats potato chips, and he's living a very different life. You will want to see that after this episode because we talk about it anyway. So that's it. Enjoy the show, everyone, and I'll catch up with you after the interview with Peter. Good afternoon, Peter. It's good to see you.
Hello, Sky. It's good to be back with you again, too. You're looking great today.
Thanks. I've been able to be outside a lot, and that definitely fuels my spirit. And I remember one of the biggest reasons I continued my search in order to let go of pain and live an empowered life instead of a life of just chronic, endless suffering from ankylosing spondylitis was because I wanted to play. And there's one thing about fall in the mountains, and it's that I go out and play. And I look at the leaves and they're changing color, and I get to spend time with wildlife, and I've been feeling really, really good. And I think you can see that.
Oh, I can see you glowing with energy. I mean, definitely so. And there's nothing like the change of seasons to bring us out of our shell and into a new aspect of life. You know, the seasons are representative of the years of our lives, you know, the spring years, the summer, the autumn years, and then the winter. It's very popular. It's a popular subject for songwriters and poets and so forth and so on as a metaphor to talk about the change of seasons in life. So everybody likes that. And it's a good time to change your habits at the change of seasons. Change your diet. You know, you change your wardrobe. You change your behaviors to suit the new season that's coming in. So, yeah, you've been out there big game hunting, huh?
I have. Yeah, I've been running around in the mountains a lot and loving
Great
it.
time of year for it.
Yeah, yeah. So you just said something I really like. You said basically embracing the seasons, we can embrace change, whether it's a wardrobe, and you said new patterns and new behaviors. And one of the topics that we want to discuss today is how to do our best to live like a healthy person, despite having ankylosing spondylitis and the symptoms and the lifestyle challenges and everything that comes with that. And so in my training with you, you taught me to live like a healthy person, Sky. And you got my focus away from the problems into living, even though I was in pain, to living like a healthy person, at least as much as possible. What words do you have to say on that? What is a way that people can start living healthier, even if they're in a lot of pain?
Well, that goes to a success principle that's true in all endeavors in life, whether it's our relationships, our health and wellness, or our career and income and all the rest of it. It goes to your self-image and to acting as if. So we call it act as if your issue or desire is already here. And so you manifest it more readily in your self-awareness, your self-image, your self-confidence, your self-control, your habits, your functions. Simply act as if it's already with you. So that's why we want to act like a healthy person acts when, you know, visibly we may not feel like it or seem like it. Acting as if is also called fake it till you make it, right? Everybody's heard that. And we use that in our business relationships and so forth. I'm not a big fan of faking it in any regard. So I don't say fake it till you make it. I say you act as if it's already real. So if you act as if you're already healthy and you're doing things that healthy people do, you give the signal to your body-mind complex to continue with that behavior and those beliefs. So acting as if you're already healthy is a main aspect of mind-body healing. Now, how do you do that? Because, you know, when you're in chronic pain and you wake up in the morning and you got flare-ups and spasms and so forth, how do you act like it's not happening? You know, you can't fake it till you make it. So these are the techniques we give in our coaching practice as to how to do that. But essentially, that's the outcome and that's the goal, is to get to the state where you are being healthy and acting like a healthy person acts. So you do the best you can with what you've got, and it continues to improve and get better and better when you apply the techniques properly. Mm-hmm. Act as if, Skylar. You remember me telling you that?
I do. Absolutely. Yeah.
Act like a healthy person acts. Do what a healthy person does. Eat what a healthy person eats. Behave like a healthy person behaves. And then it gives the signal to the mind-body complex to continue with that feedback and response in the body. So it helps.
And I remember along the lines of kind of my story and my time with you, I remember where I would come to you in a lot of pain, and the pain moved all over my body. Say it was in my hips at the time. I'd come to you with all these problems about my hips and how much the pain was difficult, and it was just everything wrong and bad about it. And you were able to help me acknowledge that most of my body was actually functioning correctly. And you'd be like, Sky, you'd be like, can you see? Like, yeah, I can see. Can you talk? Can you taste? Can you smell? Like, can you move around? Like, yeah, kind of. Like, most of the things were actually working well with my body. I was just super focused on the problem. When I stayed in that mindset, it was impossible to act like a healthy person if I was just focused on the problem. And so with your help, I was like, whoa, like most of my body actually is working correctly. Don't you agree?
Absolutely right. 99% of what's going on physically in your body is working well and properly. And yet we focus on that 1% that isn't. And what we focus on expands. That's another success principle. What you put your attention to grows, and it becomes your reality. So attention creates reality. People don't understand that because they think reality is external. It's something outside of themselves. The reality of, the garden and the trees outside my window here. That's what they would call reality. But it's perception, and my perception of that makes it a reality. So I'm looking at the tree right there. It's a grapefruit tree. It's got broad green, bright green leaves and yellow, ripe, golden fruit. And to me, I can tell what it is by my perception of it. It's a grapefruit tree. But to a rattlesnake that lives in this part of the world, it doesn't look that way at all, because rattlesnakes see an infrared light. They're seeing the heat signature. They're not seeing the broad green leaves and the golden orange fruit. They're seeing a heat signature. So their perception of that reality is completely different. And then insects as well, and bees that see an ultraviolet light, their perception of that tree is different. So these are different beings who live in my backyard and show up in this part of the world and perceive reality completely differently. The same holds true for human beings. We're creating our own realities as we go along, and we don't even understand how it works. But reality is perceptive. And it's all called relative truth. Everything is relative to what I feel is my truth. So some people believe, for instance, that minorities are evil people, or there's something wrong with them. And that becomes their perception. And so they might be watching the news tonight and see a story on a crime that was committed, and it was a minority person who was the perpetrator, and they reinforce their belief about that by saying, see, I told you there's something with these people that we need to pay attention to. And it becomes their reality, which is not to be confused with actuality, which is what's actually happening in that case. And does this mean that all minorities are evil people? Well, of course not. But the reality is different for every individual. So we're creating our own perceptions, which inform our own realities. And it's all based on beliefs and then follow through with behaviors. So if you act like a healthy person acts and you believe like a healthy person believes, you're more apt to see the results of that focus than if you're focused on what's wrong. So when I told you about all the things that are going right in your body and you focused on those, that became a new reality for you. That was something that you hadn't perceived before. And so you began to focus on that, and what was the likely result? You felt better. You got more positive. The pain lessened up a little bit. Everything started going in the right direction again. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And you bring up a really good point. So something happens in life, right? And then there's our perception. An event happens, and then there's our perception of the event. So
Yes.
say someone gets diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, that's the event. And then there's their perception of the event. Most people are terrified when they get an AS diagnosis. And then they discover your coaching or my coaching, and they start realizing there's a lot of lessons they can learn from this, and they can actually reduce their pain, reclaim their life, and move forward. And so their perception of the AS changes, and they start, like my experience, I started embracing the lessons that AS was teaching me and that your coaching was teaching me, and then honoring how my body was actually amazing. And my perception of the whole event was changing. And as my perception was changing and I was applying the tools, my body changed as well.
Because the body follows the mind. I can give you a really good example of this that's a mind blower, and the people listening to this podcast will be blown out of their socks.
Great.
To hear what I'm going to say. I was talking to my youngest brother a little while back, and he asked me what's going on and what I'm up to in life today and so forth. And I said that I'm doing a lot of podcasts on ankylosing spondylitis and coaching for it. And he said, oh, ankylosing spondylitis. I was diagnosed with that. And you know how you just said when people are given the diagnosis of AS, it changes their perception of what they're capable of and what they have to deal with from now on? So my brother is a Coast Guard officer, and he spends months at a time out at sea. He's in the Caribbean interdicting drug runners and other criminals that are trying to make it to the American shores. And he'll be out there for 6 to 8 or 9 months at a time living on a ship, a Coast Guard cutter. So he said his back was killing him because he sleeps in like a hammock on board the ship. And his back had been killing him for a couple of years. And so he finally, when they were in port, he went to the doctor. And the doctor diagnosed him with ankylosing spondylitis. And he goes, well, what does that mean? And the doctor said, well, you're going to have to stop doing this and that and the other. You're going to have to start paying attention to this more, and you're going to have subluxations and degenerations of your spine, and you're going to have chronic pain, and you better get ready for all this. And my brother said, I don't have time for that. I'm going back out to sea in 2 weeks. So he didn't accept the diagnosis, and his pain went away. That blew me away when he said, oh, I was diagnosed with AS, and they told me what it entailed. And I said, I don't have time for that. He didn't accept it, and it went away.
Yeah. Interesting. So he didn't take it, it didn't become part of his self-image. It didn't become part of who
Correct.
he was told or who he thought he was. And that's really important because the body-mind complex likes to identify, like our brain likes to identify with form and things. And then we're taught to listen to authority. And so a doctor who has a lot of authority told him something he didn't want to hear, and he did not take it on as part of who he was.
Correct. And it went away.
Wow.
He just didn't accept it as a reality.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
When I heard that, I was blown away. I'm like, I had this stuff for 10 years. I was fighting it. And in those days, I didn't keep in touch with my family very often, so I never talked about it. He never knew I had it. I was dealing with it and fighting it and trying to make it go away and get rid of it and figure it out and, you know, all the rest of the stuff that everyone does. Where, again, his experience was completely different because he didn't accept it as part of who he is. He didn't take it on as his self-image.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't become part of his reality, and it fell away on its own. No more back pain. That blew me away. He just didn't, he's like, I don't believe that. I don't have time for that.
Yeah. And I imagine he was solid about that. Like he rejected the diagnosis, right? And I imagine he was very solid about that. He was like, no, I just don't have time to deal with this, right? He wasn't like, maybe, because it sounds like he just didn't identify with it in the slightest.
He just dismissed it. He didn't give it any more thought or attention than that. When he heard what the doctor said about it, he just said, I don't accept that. What his words were, I don't have time for that. I'm going back out to sea next week or in 2 weeks. So I can't accept this diagnosis and change my life and live my life around it.
Mm-hmm.
And his pain went away.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Brilliant.
very, very, very strong with his convictions.
Yeah. Yeah. He must have been very strong with his conviction, I imagine. And good for him. I mean, I guess I learned a lot from the whole experience, but we both had to suffer for a long time when he didn't have to.
Right, right. His path was different. My path was a little more introspective and took me more time to reach the conclusion and the light at the end of the tunnel. Same with you. It's a karmic issue for me. It may not be for everybody, but for me, I can see where it led me on a path of discovery and awakening to my authentic and essential self. So it was decidedly a benefit and a boon in my life. Instead of the worst thing that ever happened to me, it became the best thing.
I was talking with someone yesterday who she's been a physical trainer for athletes. She's worked in colleges, like with the basketball and football teams. And then she's gotten into home care and she does hospice work now. And she has a really solid understanding of health, both mental and physical. And I was talking with her yesterday about this very topic of how people can identify with the diagnosis to such a degree that sometimes they even kind of forget who they are, and their entire focus becomes on this label that they've been given.
I
And
am sick.
I am sick. I am someone with an incurable, lifelong, painful disease that's going to like overwhelm everything else I thought I was going to do in life. And when that's where their mindset is, that's what they're going to get.
You're absolutely right. And the body follows the mind in every case. So as we believe, so we receive. And it's true with our health and our awareness just as much as anything else.
Yeah.
So that's something that people don't realize is what they put their attention to expands. Again, that was the original point that we started with there. What you focus on expands and grows stronger and stronger in your awareness and reality and becomes your personal reality. So what are you focused on? That's where we begin with mind-body training.
Yeah. Yeah. Both you and I love understanding how the brain works. And this comes down to a term called target fixation. What are we targeting? What are we fixated on? In my bedroom right now, I have some big pieces of paper and I write down a bunch of cool stuff on them. It's wisdom. And it's almost all wisdom that AS taught me, right? Or coaching with you taught me. And I keep that stuff in my mind, right? And I keep my mind focused on that target instead of the target of dealing with chronic pain or the fear of chronic illness or what are people gonna say to me at a birthday party when I can't eat the cake because I'm not eating starch or sugar or alcohol
Or anything.
or anything. Yeah, I'm on a water fast. You know, I mean, people do extreme things, and I don't blame them. Pain
Well,
is a huge
we don't
motivator.
blame them because we understand what's going on and we did the same thing ourselves. But what they're focused on is what they fear.
Yeah.
And so they're creating more and more of that, even if it's not even real. That's what worrying is. People don't understand that when they worry, they're mentally fixated on something, and maybe it's not on top of their mind every day, you know, it gets pushed back into the subconscious mind. But if it's constantly there, it becomes a meditation. Worry is meditating on what you don't want, and it's based on fear because you don't want it. You don't want this to happen, so you're afraid, what if it does happen? What will happen next, or what have you? So that's where people are basing their reality, is it's fear-based. And no successful, happy, healthy individual lives that way. So that's how my life has unfolded, and it's been a hell of a go. I mean, I've had some pretty big challenges in life, but that just improved my character and showed me what was possible and led me to have compassion for those who go through the same or similar issues. That's why I have tremendous compassion for people in chronic pain, because I know what it's like, man. I was completely living that life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I changed my focus, I changed my language, I changed my beliefs and behaviors, and everything began to get better.
Yeah. People that become diagnosed with chronic illness, they do tend to worry a lot. Back to your point of worrying and how it is meditating on things that we don't want. And when we worry, it also is putting a lot of stress into our body. We all know that stress is not good. And a lot of the work I've done with you was letting go of different types of stress that I did not even realize I was in. And one of them was I was worrying a lot. I was super worried about my future. I was super worried about living a life of disability. I was super worried about finding a partner that would still love me, even though I was in chronic pain and like upset about it. And it made me feel weak and very disempowered. And those were all terrifying. I worried and worried and worried, and it filled my body with stress. I think a lot of people with chronic illness can really resonate with that.
Let me interject then at that point, Skylar, and say, what happened to you as you were living that reality?
My situation got worse. My pain got worse. Medications helped less. I was spiraling down into even scarier levels of sadness and fear and depression and despondence.
So it continued to worsen.
Continued to worsen. And I can see why that was a natural place for my head to go when I didn't have the tools to think otherwise. I was trying to focus on the problems because I thought that's what was going to make them better. And when my focus was there, I was even more stressed out and more concerned and more worried. And so, of course, I just was filling my body with stress hormones, which threw off my immune system even more, reinforced victimization at every turn. And then the people around me, even though they loved me, there was like less and less and less that they could do because I was just getting worse, and it was like out of their hands because they didn't know what to do either.
So what you were focused on expanded.
Exactly.
And what turned it around?
A shift of focus. Absolutely.
That's where it began, with what you're focused on, right? You changed your focus.
Yeah.
And you began to trust that everything would be okay. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Yeah. The shift of focus was when I found you. A new theme came into play, and it was when I discovered you, and it was one of hope. It was like, holy crap, someone has answers. And that was a shift of focus. Absolutely.
So you stopped resisting
Yeah.
what you were afraid of. You stopped fighting and pushing against what you did not want. And that goes to one of the laws of life that was coined by Carl Jung 100 years ago, where he said, what we resist persists.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we focus on expands.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got a new direction and a new breath of fresh air from my teachings, and just realizing that I was in the world, somebody who was talking about these things in a way that was hopeful and positive, and you changed your reality and stopped resisting what you didn't want and started focusing on what you did want. Is that correct?
It's absolutely correct. And I can see so clearly, and anyone that understands the mind-body complex can really see how this works with the people that have AS, is they're fighting it so hard. And again, it's easy to do because it hurts.
Right.
And so we fight it and we don't want it. And that's exactly why it gets worse, because it causes more stress. The harder we fight, the worse it gets. Very clear when we understand the mind-body complex.
So there's a whole mentality out there based on that, which is called the warrior mentality. And we have these people who are calling themselves AS warriors. I was one of them. You were likely probably one of them too, where we were fighting and taking the pain and doing the best we could to cope with it and never give up and, you know, always resist and fight back and so forth. The AS warriors never heal. As long as you're fighting a war, the war's never over.
Yeah.
So the reason that people do that is because they don't know what else to do. There's nobody out there talking about what else they can do, except acquiesce and roll over and, you know, let it get the best of them. But that's not what we're advocating either.
Yeah. Yeah, the AS warriors, they don't heal. You're correct in that. And you've said it very clearly before that if peace is ever going to be made, the fighting has to stop. And
yeah, if there's a war in the world, when does it come to peace? When the fighting stops.
mm-hmm.
If the fighting continues, there's no peace.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's going on with the AS warriors and the other chronic pain warriors that are out there. They're fighting. And what they resist persists. And so the war is never won. The healing is never accomplished. Peace is never made. So I realized, I figured it out. And I realized if I want peace with this life and I want to feel good about myself and let go of the pain, I've got to stop fighting it. And that's what people can't seem to figure out. You know, as they're trying to figure out what to do and where it comes from and how to handle it and what they're going to do next, and they're trying to figure it all out. There's nothing to figure out any longer. You just let go and stop fighting, and then take the proper steps that we teach in our coursework to create healing and health and wellness in a way that you hadn't had before. And it begins in the mind.
And that's where this podcast and the conversations we have here have been such a relief for people. When they hear this kind of conversation, it's so different than what they've typically found online. And as both you and I know, when someone finds us and they're interested in what we're saying, their life has changed forever.
Yeah. So once they learn all these new aspects of how the self works and what's going on in the body and mind, it changes permanently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so fascinating to me. Both you and I love psychology, the psychology of chronic illness, the psychology of pain. And this target fixation principle is really important. I mean, your brother's example is so good. Of just, I mean, how many people wish they could have just done that, right? And even though they haven't, it's a good example of what is possible when you get the brain working for you, for your wellness, instead of against you, and in fear and in sadness and anxiety and disease.
Absolutely right. In my brother's case, when they told him what it was, he's like, well, I don't have time for that. I can't do that.
I love that. Like, how strong was your brother to say that? Like, he's got an authoritative figure, right? Doctors, they're very smart. Lots of them are very good people. They care about what they do. And here is this authoritative figure telling him what his life is going to look like according to that person, according to the
Right.
doctor. And he's like, no, I'll pass. I'll order something else off the menu. Like,
Exactly. And then he just went back to his life. Case closed.
yeah,
That's it. All right. I don't accept it. We're done.
yeah,
So the fact that that's even possible tells us about the power of the mind and the body working together.
yeah, yeah.
And I can hear skeptics out there saying, well, he probably didn't have it anyway, but that was the diagnosis that came down from the medical community.
Mm-hmm.
So when people accept that awareness, then it becomes a reality. When they accept that decree from those in power, that becomes what they're focused on, and their self-identity reflects that. It's like, I am a sick person. I'm a person with AS. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to have to take medications, these particular drugs. I'm going to try this and try that and try the other. We're going to figure it out. I'm going to try different dietary approaches, and we're going to eat this and not eat that and not eat the other, and got to figure it out. And all that does is confuse the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the body follows suit with whatever we're paying attention to, because what we focus on expands, and our attention creates our reality, which is one of the habits that heal.
Yeah. Yeah, let's jump into that. So this is Winslow's Habits That Heal, lesson number 12. I know you have a lot of these, and we've kind of jumped around a little bit in this podcast. That's fun because they fit the theme of the podcast, and I love that. So lesson number 12, attention creates reality. Peter explains it like this. He says, there are many ways to focus your attention. However, many people claim to have specific goals or intentions, but because they don't give it the correct attention or appreciation, their desire is split. They may think they're focused on their desires, but they're actually focused on the lack of what they desire. It may sound illogical, but the feeling that your desire is not here yet is actually focusing on lack. Instead, learn to become what you desire. What does this mean? Become completely familiar with how it feels. Explore it fully, act as if, and dive in before you have any proof of its being. Once you are immersed in this way, feel it in every bone in your body. Learn to hold this state of being, not the lack of it. And it is simply a matter of time until the desire manifests in your reality. Interesting. That's great, Peter. And I think about my time with you and how I learned wellness. I learned the art of wellness, and I began to feel the wellness in my body. And I did exactly what you described at the bottom here, which was once I'm immersed in it, okay, so once I was able to feel good, I would feel it in every bone in my body. It was part of what I did daily. I really intentionally put it in every bone in my body, and it felt wonderful. So I just like kept on doing it and doing that with some consistency. It was, as you say, only a matter of time until it manifested in my reality, or I could also change that, say, in my body, because that's where I was really physically feeling the pain leave. Does that make sense?
Yeah, your material reality is the body. So that's what makes sense. You said as soon as you were able to feel good, you made these changes. We want to make sure that we're clear on what that means. It wasn't that all the pain was gone, so your body was feeling, healed and good all the time. It was that you felt good about your prospects. You felt like there was a way out of this living hell and this nightmare that you had been in. You felt hopeful and positive that you were on the right track and on the right path now. That's what it means to feel good in this case. So that's one of the coaching principles, to understand that your attention creates reality and how to do that. And you explained it there in my little explanation about what does this mean and how do we do that. So people have to realize that when their attention is split because they're really focused on what they don't want and they think they're focused on what they do want. I want to heal. I want to heal. Well, that means there's something wrong with you that needs to be healed. And if the healing isn't here yet, then you're actually focused on what isn't there. You're focused on the lack of what you think you want. So that's when the attention is split and the manifesting doesn't occur as readily or even at all. So we have to immerse ourselves in it and become one with principles that we want to experience in our lives. We do this in all aspects of our lives, in our relationships, in our careers, in our health and wellness and so forth. We're doing this already, but people don't realize exactly what they're doing. There's a biblical scripture that talks about that too in the book of Matthew, I think it is, where Jesus is asked and he says, when you pray, believe that you have received and it shall be added unto you. And people mistake that and think that he said, believe that you will receive. That doesn't work. It's a mistranslation from the ancient Aramaic language that Jesus spoke into the Greek, which is the original language of the New Testament. And through that translation, much was lost. Believe that you have received, and then it comes to you. Instead, people are saying, believe that you will receive, and then it doesn't come because you're always, I will receive it. So today, you're thinking, I will receive, and tomorrow it's, it hasn't come yet, but I will get it one day, and I will someday have it. And it's like that day after day after day until finally one day you say, that's it, I've received it. And everybody's had the experience of this in their lives in small ways or large ways, where they've wanted something and they've wanted it and wanted it and wanted it and never achieved it. And then as soon as they stop wanting it, it shows up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember I used to want a 10-speed English racer bike when I was a kid, and I wanted it and I wanted it and I wanted it year after year after year, and then it just never arrived. And so then by then I was like 14 years old. Now I wanted a motorcycle. I wanted a dirt bike. I didn't want a bicycle anymore. And guess what I got for Christmas? A bicycle.
Yeah,
as soon as we stop wanting a thing, it shows up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we can't get what we want because we're wanting. Wanting is lack. It's separation. I want that thing means I don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as I have it, I don't want for it anymore. There's no wanting involved. I might appreciate it, like, I have a nice house and I appreciate it instead of I still want it. I'm not wanting for a house. I have a house, so I appreciate what I have. There's no separation. I'm not wanting for it anymore. We don't get what we want. We get what we are. Mm-hmm. As soon as we realize that, then it makes it easier to act as if we are already that thing to the best of our ability without faking it. You can't really fake it till you make it. You just have a positive expectation and attitude and put one step in front of the next, one foot in front of the other in the direction that feels right. And that's when reality begins to show up in our lives. So instead of focusing on the lack, and that's what everybody with AS is doing, they're focused on trying to get rid of it. So they're focused on the lack of health and wellness and feeling good. So you said as soon as you began to feel good, which we unpacked and said that means that you were hopeful, you were competent, you were moving in the right direction, you were confident of that fact. That was the feeling good that led one step to the next in the direction of what you intended for, so your intention was no longer split. Is that right?
Yeah, that's really correct. And I really started to trust my body again. So the pain wasn't gone yet. You pointed that out, but I was finding hope. I was finding guidance. I was learning more. And so my mindset, I started to feel better. And I started to really realize that my brain and my body were working with me and for me all the time. It's just that in the past, I didn't know what I was telling my body. I didn't know, I didn't, I didn't know I was so stressed out. I didn't know that my self-image was related to health. And I didn't know why I was just getting sicker and sicker and sicker until the shift of focus and receiving the guidance. And that is where I started to realize, like, whoa, my body is brilliant. And as my mind changes, the body changes. As I want health less, right? Which is actually, again, just unconsciously reinforcing illness. Like, so as I was letting the wanting better health go, focusing on becoming and honoring the health that was, again, shift of focus there, right? Target fixation difference. That's where, when I held that for a long enough time, the body began to feel better.
That's the principle. That's how it works.
Yeah.
That creates the new reality.
And it's amazing how simple it can be. I can see, like, your brother did it instantaneously, right? He did it instantaneously. And I took quite a long time. But I remember being diagnosed for the second time at the University of California in San Francisco. And I also deeply refuted the diagnosis. Although, again, I wasn't like your brother. I didn't just like kind of snap out of it with such a fast mindset change, but I knew I was going to play again. I knew I was going to live a physical life. I knew that I was willing to keep on searching until I found the answers. And I didn't simply accept like the broad label as like, this is what my life is going to look like. And so I also had that dismissal inside. And I think that people that find this podcast and find both you and I, they have some of that. And that's why they're open to continue searching for answers. They have a spark of dismissal and even like one of positivity inside of themselves already. And that's where, like with target fixation, we can focus on the goodness instead of just the pain, and the goodness grows and the health grows and people become happier.
So it would be helpful to unpack what we mean when we say dismissal. In my brother's case, he was just done with it. He wasn't resisting it and, keeping it alive in the back of his mind saying, well, what if, and maybe so, or, this could be the reality that I have to live with and I don't want it. He just let it go, dismissed it without rejecting, or, well, I guess I should say without resisting instead of rejecting. He just dropped it. It's like, nope, not going to have that. Mm-hmm. So that's what it means to dismiss in this case. It's not fighting against it, trying to make it go away, trying to refute it and dismiss it and, push it out of your experience, because that will make it stronger. What you resist persists, remember. So when you fight against something, it fights back. And this is especially true of your body and your thoughts. If you fight against the thoughts, you're focused on those thoughts by default, and those thoughts continue to return to you in one form or another. And that's what's happening with people with chronic pain. They're victims of their thoughts. They don't understand what thinking is and where it comes from and why it's happening to them in this way. And they're trying to manage and control it to the best of their ability. But the body's being confused by this, and it just continues in the direction of the dominant thought, which, if you've accepted the diagnosis, the dominant thought is, I'm broken. I'm messed up. There's something terribly wrong with me, and I don't want it. So there's your resistance that creates persistence in the energy fields of your awareness. Mm-hmm. So dismissal just means drop it.
And both you and I have seen how people are on their own timeline with that. I can think of a couple examples of people that were able to dismiss AS and let it go very quickly. You and I, before we started recording, we're talking about our friend Patty. Patty has a great testimonial. He talks about diet. He was on the low and no starch diet for 4 years, fully immersed himself in it. Totally. And he realized it wasn't healthy. And he was really fun to work with because he was willing and ready to to let it go. Like he was able to dismiss it pretty quickly, and he was never combative. And sometimes, as you've seen, Peter, people can make excuses that actually hold on to illness. Patty was just ready to let it go, and so he did what I told him to do, and sure enough, he's feeling better.
He started
And
acting like a healthy person acts, eating what a healthy person eats. He said, what's up with the pathogens? I always thought it was caused by these bacteria and virus or whatever, other pathogens are in the system. And when I did what Skylar taught me and just started acting like a healthy person and eating properly again, the pain left. So where's the pathogen in all this equation?
yeah,
What's going on with all this? He was blown away by it. That's why I think it motivated him to make a testimonial.
yeah.
So that he could help other people.
Patty's great. And if anyone wants to see that, I encourage you to watch it. It's on skydenton.com in the testimonials area. But Patty sent me that video, and the title of it was Klebsiella is bullshit. And that was something he said time and time again when we were working together, because he's starting to eat like potato chips and all these things. And he's like, where's the pain? The pain's not coming back, and I'm eating starch. And so he was always like, Klebsiella is bullshit. And he sent me the video with that title, and I changed it to Patty's experience. I guess I'm just being a little more politically correct. I don't know. But
Yeah.
he really realized how important his mindset was in the entire process. And he was able to come to the conclusion that Klebsiella is bullshit, and he let it go. And he's like, he's doing great.
Never look back.
Yeah. Never look back.
So what I'd like people to understand is that if he can do it, you can do it. It's possible for everyone. It isn't that we're superhuman beings here that aren't susceptible to the same laws of nature that everyone else is. But we've discovered what the people are looking for, the holy grail of recovery and remission. And recovery from AS completely happens when we change our minds and the bodies follow the mind. Mm-hmm. That's why we're getting the results we're getting, whereas when you go to the medical practitioners, as useful or helpful as they are and as much as they'd like to help us, what they're offering is simply treating the symptoms and not the cause of what's going on. And the cause is stress. The cause of the imbalance in the immune system is unrequited mental and emotional stress, unresolved emotional stress. And that stress on those very deep levels that you're not even aware of, that's why it's called subconscious. Again, people think, oh, I know what that is. I know what's in my subconscious mind. Well, then it's not subconscious. Sub means below consciousness, means you don't know what's going on there. Once you do know what's going on there, it becomes your conscious awareness. So the subconscious stress is unresolved, and that's what creates the imbalances in the immune system that lead to the inflammation and pain in the body. So as long as we're simply trying to fix the body and make the mind follow the body, well, we see the results of that in the medical literature and in their belief system. The medical professionals say there is no solution because they haven't got one. But that doesn't mean that there is no solution in other forms and approaches of contending and dealing with chronic pain. In fact, many doctors know this. They know that if you relieve the stress, then you're going to have results of one form or another. And if you do what we're teaching in the order in which we teach it, we get remission and recovery most often, and it becomes the norm and not the exception. So there's nothing more to figure out. You don't have to find why your body's doing what it's doing and what's happening with Klebsiella and other microbacteria. I sat in on a seminar with naturopathic doctors last week who were talking about issues of leaky gut syndrome. And now, that's not even widely understood, but now they're saying that's a red herring too. There's no such thing as leaky gut syndrome, really, in most people. Because if you have a leaky gut that's letting these particles come through undigested into the system, you'll die. So leaky gut is terminal in every case. And people who are believing that their gut is leaking are not all dying and dropping dead left and right. So these particular doctors were reflecting on that and saying, this really isn't well understood at all, and it doesn't seem to be a factor.
I love hearing that, because a lot of people are really stuck thinking that's the problem.
Well, I'm not a doctor, and we're not practicing medicine in any way here. But I did sit in on that discussion, and I thought it was highly interesting. The latest science and what we know about these conditions that people think are the cause of their chronic illness. The cause of your chronic illness is your self-image. And your self-image, if you have chronic pain and illness, is I am broken. There's something wrong here. There's something wrong with me. And that becomes your dominant self-image, and that's what you focus on subconsciously. That's always there with you. It's how your friends identify you. Oh, Skylar, yeah, he's the guy who can't eat birthday cake at the party because he's got this condition. That's who he is. And that reinforces your self-image to them and to you as well. And the body follows the mind. So we want to intercede and break that pattern and create a new self-image. And from there, all change occurs.
Perfect. So we're going to end it right there with what you just said.
Yeah, that's a good point to end on.
Totally. What you just said, you summarized the process very well. And where can people find you, Peter? What's the best way for them to contact you?
asvictors.com. That's my central hub. You can find out what we're doing and how we're doing it, and how you too can create remission, relief, and recovery from AS from that place. asvictors.com.
And is that the site that they can also get the book called Coping? And again, the title is Coping, Caring, and Communicating?
Yes, Coping, Caring, and Communicating is for caregivers.
Yeah.
For people with AS.
Okay.
And that and my other books, I think I have 4 books on AS. They're all available there at that website, asvictors.com.
Great, Peter. Well, thank you for your time today. I super appreciate it. And it's an honor having you on the show, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Any way I can help the world and help people to alleviate suffering and move into a grand way of life instead and living, I'm all for it. So thank you again for providing this platform as we make the world a better place.
You're welcome. And we'll see you again very soon.
All right, Skylar. See you then.
All right. Welcome back. I would love for people to consider sharing this podcast if they know someone who's an AS warrior, because the AS warriors, this is very new information for them, and they could really benefit from it. There's no doubt. And reach out to me with questions. I love it when people send me emails. You can go to skydenton.com and email me through there. And who knows, if you ask a good question, we can cover it on the podcast. That also gives other people content to think about as well. We are a giant family, and I know what it's like to be in pain. I know how to get out of it. And so I also love getting your questions, because then we can bring your information into the show in a way that benefits you all. And that is really the goal here. I want to thank Peter again. And I encourage also his book called Coping, Caring, and Communicating for People with AS. Someone with AS, their situation impacts the people around them as well. And the caregivers, the boyfriends, the girlfriends, the parents, the children. And all of them have a role to play in how they handle their life in regards to the person with AS. And oftentimes they are enforcing and reinforcing illness and the person being victimized, other than the person feeling better. And so I am promoting that book right now, because I do know that it's really important. If you're listening to this and you have AS, there are people in your life. And those people in your life want the best for you, and they want the best for themselves. And that book can shed a new light and a new understanding on the best way to go about engaging in life with someone who is suffering from ankylosing spondylitis. And with that, my friends, I love telling you that it is possible to feel good again. You do not have to simply cope with chronic pain. You can heal from it and move on to living a very, very fantastic life. I encourage you all to reach out to me, skydenton.com. Share this podcast anywhere you are comfortable. And I will see you again next week. Send me questions and enjoy yourselves. Life is a celebration. Reclaiming your health from chronic illness is an absolute celebration. And those of you listening to the show are doing that. So go out, live well, enjoy yourself and those around you.